Welcome to Reality Coaching for Writers, where we offer the real stuff, no fluff. And Diana, what is our pressing question today?
The question is, does your hero or heroine always get what they want by the end of the story?
Yeah, like in life, do we always get what we want at the end of life? Yeah, I thought about that. I thought about that question. When you posed it earlier, I was thinking, what did I want when I was 10 years old? And have I gotten any closer to getting it? So, Diane, I'll put you on the spot. When you were a kid, what was the one thing you wanted more than anything in the world?
To travel.
Any particular place?
No, just the whole world. Especially, I wanted to see the pyramids. I really had a fascination with them, and it's still part of my bucket list.
Well, you have traveled quite a bit,
Yeah,
right?
I have, and I've enjoyed it, and I plan to do some more. So that one thing has morphed, though. I'm not so sure, with the way the political situation is in the world, that going to Egypt is a good idea. So I might change that and just adjust my, travel desires. But yes, traveling is still something, but it definitely has changed the locations where I want to go.
Yeah, I was thinking about the question, and I guess the only answer I would have had was I wanted to play Major League Baseball. That was when I love baseball. I loved baseball when I was a kid, and I still like. If I could play it, I'd still enjoy playing it now. But I was always small, and my dad said something one time about I was never going to make it to the major leagues, and that just kind of blew my dream. I was like, really? I'm not going to make it? Oh man! And so, other than that, I really didn't have any childhood dreams. But that's what we're talking about today: is your lead characters, and this is primarily about fiction, about your lead character's main objective at the beginning of a story. And that if the reader doesn't know what your main character wants, then they have no way of tracking how far they are along in the story and whether your character is getting closer or not. And I think you were going to talk a little bit about that.
Well, and just, I'm thinking about the way stories were written years ago. And as a literary agent, I would often get submissions from retired school teachers who finally had the time to write, but they would write a story that was just really not for today's reader. They were writing a very old-fashioned tale. There wasn't a lot of action. There weren't a lot of obstacles. And the way life is now, the action is, it's coming at us from all sides rapidly. And life is very uncertain. So there are no guarantees that a marriage will last, or your child will be born healthy, or a loved one won't die in an accident, So I find that readers today are looking for a different story than might have been written 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago even, So I think they're really wanting a story that is relatable, but that is also relevant, that's universal, something universal to the human condition. But they want to see it. They want to see their hero or hero struggle with life, because.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. To me, it boils down to two different wants. There's either a desire. You can either have a character who desires to get something. Like at the beginning of the story, they actually want to get something. That's why we opened up with what did we want to do, and you wanted to travel, and I wanted to play baseball. That's an achievement, trying to achieve a get goal, right?
Right.
And it can be anything. I mean, it can be any objective. And the reader, to your point about relatable, it helps if the character wants the same thing the reader wants in fiction, right? If they're wanting the same thing, then right away there's a relationship, right, between the reader and the character. So that's good. And that's one reason romance, sells so well, is because you've got all these readers that apparently want romance or affection or something, and so they relate to the characters. And is she going to get it, or he going to get it, or not? So that works well. And the other way to look at it is to get away from something, to escape, and that can be an escape. It can be a travel kind of story, you know, an exotic location. That can be a getaway kind of story, but it also, that genre fits into thrillers and suspense,
Right.
you
Yeah.
know, because your lives are in danger. So it's either a get something or a get away something. Those are kind of the two big buckets that you might throw your
Right.
character. Um,
That's good. Yeah. Yeah.
and
And I think, you know, that we always used to wrap up stories with a bow. And I remember the first time I read a Krista Parrish novel. Um, I think it was called The Long Way Home, but I loved it because it did not wrap up in a, you know, happy ending. It kind of left you hopeful, though. It was very satisfactory, I thought, because it left the character in a much healthier place and on the path to get what she wanted. And it was interesting in the book club how we as readers thought about that. Some were like very disturbed that it wasn't tied up in a bow and that she, you know, didn't get everything. But others of us really loved that she was still on the journey. And probably because those of us that loved that were still on our own journey, you know. So even though, Eddie, it wasn't exactly my journey, I was cheering her on in her journey, you know, because we were both on one. So I found it very satisfactory.
it sounds like those of you that enjoyed the story and were okay with it would have made great project managers, because that was my experience at IBM. If you were a project manager, you know, you were managing a certain part of the project. You didn't see the beginning, you didn't see the end. You only managed your little. And you know, they asked me if I wanted to. I was like, no, I can't do that. I want to birth the baby. I want to see the baby all the way to the delivery room. You don't stop me at 3 months and say you did a good job getting it to 3 months leave. You know? So I'm probably in that club. I want to see it tied up in a bow at the end.
That's interesting because you're right. That's I don't mind being a cog in the wheel of
Right.
somebody's journey. I don't mind just playing that part, you know. And I'm almost happy to say, okay, now go on to, you know, the next phase, and then next, and just helping the next person through the
Yes.
middle. I guess I'm good at the messy middle, you know.
Yeah, and that's good for the writers to know that that's what your readership is. I mean, this is part of it. If you know your readers are that's your readership, then that's what you write to, and they're going to love you. And if you're, you know, if you're writing for somebody like me, and I like the thing tied up in a loose, you know, a tidy bow, then don't write for me. I don't need to pick that book up, you know, because I'm going to be mad at the end because I didn't get my money's worth. You know, don't give me 3 endings and say pick one. I don't want to pick one. You tell me how this story ends, so I can either say I liked it or didn't. Anyway.
Which shows us that, you know, tells every author, don't be upset when you get that critique or that review that the person didn't love your story, you know, because not everybody is going to love your story, and not everybody is going to agree with the way you presented it, you know. But overall, you write with your reader in mind, and most of the time you know your audience and your publisher or those that are coaching you know how to position you to find those readers.
Right.
And so for the most part, you're going to find your reader, and those readers are going to be happy, you know.
Yeah, so for fiction, we'll stick with this for a little bit longer. So for fiction, a couple of ideas that you can come at as to what some wants would be is one of them is survival. Your main character just needs to survive, and we can talk about Castaway with Tom Hanks, which was a takeoff on Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. I mean, it was the same story, just retold. So survival works. Swiss Family Robinson, that's a survival story. Those kind of stories are always, you know, fun reads for people that like survival kind of stories. Right? There's a whole genre about nothing but survivors, right? A TV series, nothing but surviving.
Right.
So that's a good one. Love and belonging. So that your romance, love story genres fit into that category. People just want the affirmation, the belonging, the showing that I'm worth. That genre works. Esteem, that revolves around self-respect, recognition. You may put, coming of age stories. You may put coming of races, of cultures, right? Gaining esteem, gaining value, having your own rights, being recognized for who you are. The health, for example, that might fall into that bucket as a film because it's one where the group is getting their esteem, finally getting recognition for who they are and their work. So those are a couple of the buckets that you may look at for what does your character want. Your character needs to be proactive and goal oriented, and this is another thing. You can have the goal, but if your character is not the one driving the action that somebody else is, then you've got a weak character, and that can be difficult to do if you've got a weak character, right? So if you think about, I think it's The Bone Collector. Maybe I've got the title wrong, but it's the one with Denzel Washington played the character, but it's the main character doesn't move, right? I may not have it right, but he's like he doesn't leave the bed, right? He's got the wisdom and the knowledge, but he can't move, right? So in theory, he's a weak character, but he's got all the knowledge. So even in that situation, your character needs to be driving the action, and it can be done through words or manipulation, but your main character needs to be driving the action.
Yes. Yeah. And in Save the Cat Writes a Novel, they talked about the A story and the B story. And the A story is the external things that happen to the character. And like there's a car chase and someone trying to escape. But there's these external things that are happening. And then the B story is how those circumstances, change the character, change their goal, change their want. And then that's what makes a great story. Like, I think the part of Castaway with, he's the characters on the island trying to survive, and all the things that he does to help himself not lose his mind, even though we see it starting to, crack because he's in this isolation, but he's doing everything he can, to the soccer ball or the volleyball becomes the friend that he has conversations with and interacts with, and he learns to forage for food. But in the end, when he goes back home, he's not the same man that goes back home. And so he's become a better man that we can cheer and celebrate. Now, in The Life of Pi, the character, have you read that? Have you ever seen it?
Yeah.
Well, I read the book and I read the book and I didn't allow anybody to spoil it for me. And I was shocked at the end, just shocked at the end. But the character gets what he wants. He survives. He did everything to survive, and he definitely got what he wanted. But at the end, we're kind of we were really liking the character until we realized the ending and all that the character did to survive. And but it makes us ask ourselves a question. So again, a good story, as we watch this character go through their life journey, it makes us ask questions. Oh my gosh, would I, in those same circumstances, have really fought to survive like that? Or would I have done it differently? How would I? It's that question that ask us in school if you're out in a lifeboat. It's kind of what The Life of Pi is. Someone question that all the teachers used to ask us.
Yeah, I was thinking about Castaway because you mentioned Wilson, the volleyball, and I don't know that when they originally did that film, I'm sure they did, but whether the volleyball meant to serve as a metaphor or not. but it certainly did, because Tom Hanks, the character, was so wrapped up in the volleyball, I couldn't let it go. Right, he threw it away,
Right.
cast it away, and then he swam back out to get the volleyball back. Wilson, come back, right? And at the end, you see the love he has for his wife, and what's happened? He's been cast away. She has given up on him, right?
Yeah.
And so, in a way, the volleyball served as a metaphor for his wife, for the love he has for his wife, right? And he was loyal to the very end, even beyond the end, but she wasn't loyal to him beyond the end. And like you said, he'd gone through so much, he was able at that point to let it go, because he'd been through so much. So yeah, all these external things, and I like what you said. I mean, really, that's what an external plot should do. It's not just action for action's sake. The action is intended to change the character in some way, or to test the character in some way. And if it's just action for action's purposes, you got a weak plot.
Right.
You do. So if you've got, but if you've got action where there's a direct consequence for your character that's stressing them, changing them, now you've got action for the right purpose. And that's good. You can do it that way.
One of the other stories that I feel just speaks to what we're talking about today is Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers. Because it's the story of Hosea, when God asked Hosea, the prophet of God, to marry a whore, because he was trying to show Israel that they had gone a whoring on God, that they were unfaithful to God, but that he loved them with a, consuming love, that he never withdrew his love from them. But and it's so beautifully when Francine wrote that, I mean, I love the wordplay and the way she describes that search, Hosea's faithfulness and unconditional love. And she had the hardest time. She at first started out surviving because of love, providing for her daughter. But then, of course, she's ultimately in a search for love for herself. And of course, she's treated, as an object, and lusts, not love. And so because of that past treatment, because of what she had lived through, she found it very hard to accept the young man's love as being real and true and trustworthy. But in the end, she gives into it, and she believes that he is trustworthy, he is lovable. And so she gets something that she didn't even know she wanted. She gets something better than what she first started out for, way beyond surviving, way beyond. She finds true love, what it really is. And it satisfies her in a way that anything she thought before or substituted before, And so that to me is such a great story and a depth of story. And we've talked about how often the Bible goes there, when so many publishers aren't willing, as far as Christian publishers, to tackle the tough things. But thankfully, because of Francine Rivers paving the way, and her previous success, and the publisher taking a chance on that story, it's a best-selling novel. And now more publishers are willing to look at great stories like that. So, but
yeah, I'm sitting there looking at my notes. So the other thing that I'm looking for in characters, is a problem solver. If you've got, and which is what you just described. She's, all characters, if they're good at it, they're solving problems. They don't stop when the problem comes along. They don't go, well, I don't know what to do with this, right? They're finding solutions, and they're not usually not placing blame on others and stopping. They're moving past the blame, and moving on to, well, I don't care whose fault it is, we got to fix this. So you're looking for a problem solver. That's an active character that your reader is going to resonate with, because they want to solve problems. They may not know how.
Yeah, that's good.
They want to hang around somebody that knows how to solve a problem. And that leads to active engagement. Your character is active throughout the story. They're not passively watching. And we talk about this before, even in dialogue. Always have some action going on. It's not just two people sitting at a table, standing up at on a corner at a city block. There needs to be some action going on between the characters. They need to be doing something together or in opposition to each other. Either way works. You know, the whole sword fight with Luke and Darth Vader. There's dialogue. That's the main part of that scene, is the dialogue between Darth Vader, who's his dad, and Luke, right, in Star Wars. Yeah. But there's a sword fight, right? You know, so that's the active engagement part of it.
Yeah, and it's a visual that reinforces the internal struggle.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because in the end of that scene,
that's an excellent example.
Luke loses an arm. He loses an arm. Yeah. He's losing his dad, because now he realizes who his dad is, and he loses an arm. So there's an internal consequence and an emotional loss and a physical loss. So it's good when you do that together.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's a powerful word picture. Yeah, for sure.
The other thing that we need to kind of keep in mind is it's not just that they want something. It's why do they want it?
Right.
What in their persona, what in their makeup drives them to want this one thing, right? I can't tell you what I wanted to be a baseball player. I don't know what that was. You might be able to explain why you wanted to travel. I don't know. But the why is probably more important than the what. The what's just the object. The why is, why do you want it? So the why your character wants it is key, and then why they can't have it is the other big one. If you can kind of hit these high spots with a character story, then your readers are going to hang around, because they're going to relate to this. A lot of times we don't know why we want things, right?
Exactly.
And so if your character knows, we find comfort in that. We go, well, at least she knew, you know, and it kind of prods us to ask that same question, like you said. Well, why do I want what I want? Why do I need to be affirmed? You know, that kind of thing. And why can't?
And who stood in your way at some point? Who stands in the way of the character's journey? Or, like you say, what happened to them that scarred them emotionally, that now they struggle in a certain area, like an area of self-worth, or they lack the ability to engage publicly. They have social anxiety. You know, there could be something that happened to them, or someone, like you said, that told them early on, you know, their voice alone, maybe the tone of their voice. Oh, don't ever go into speaking, because with your voice, you know, nobody's going to want to listen to you. And, you know, it's amazing how, well, the Bible tells us there's life or death in the power of the tongue. So sometimes it's something that was spoken to them that they have to finally learn through life circumstances that wasn't true. It was a lie that was spoken to them. And oftentimes it's when we see something mirrored, you know, we see another person in similar circumstances that is brave enough to press in and say, I don't care what was said to me. I'm going to go into this area that others told me I didn't have it to bring. And we see someone else go, and so we say, hey, they went there. Why? Maybe I could too, you know. And that's where nonfiction, some of these same things apply when you're writing nonfiction. A lot of nonfiction is, you and I say that you've got to bring story into your nonfiction as well. Well, in that story, when we read, you know, the writer's story, personal story, alongside the principles or skill that they're trying to pass on to us, it builds courage in me. When I read that, I read it and say, maybe I could try that. And you start to believe that the possibility that something's possible, whereas before it seemed you believed it was impossible.
Yeah. So the why can't, you hit on something a minute ago that's kind of key for, well, fiction and nonfiction. It works either way, but it's that why can't, that first time the character is faced with an obstacle they're told they can't have it. You just can't, right? So I'm thinking about the baseball thing. You know, my dad made a comment, and he was right. I mean, I am too short, and I couldn't hit the ball very hard, right? So there was, you know, dad knew what I didn't know, and he was just trying to help me get on with life and enjoy the game, but not be disappointed when it didn't end up like, you know, he's really trying to help me, right? But looking back now, that comment has prompted me always to want to knock down the next thing that came in front of me, said you can't. So it turns out that his comment created in me an adversary. I recognize now what the adversary is. It's the person that says you can't be a baseball player. So, okay, you know, even at 10, I didn't know how to label it, but now I can look back and go, I knew how to label it. So now when my high school teachers tell me, you can't graduate because you can't spell. Oh, I know that guy. I've heard him before. You know, I'm gonna knock him down, and so I knock him down. And then you go on to the next job, and they go, well, you're not going to succeed at this. Oh, I know that guy, right? And that's what happens in fiction if you create characters that are responding to the why can't and showing the reader how they get past it. Then in the reader's life, they can go, oh, I know what that trigger is. I know that trigger. The downside of this, Diana, is if we don't ever learn what that is, we keep repeating the same cycle because we never recognize it's the same phantom coming back again and again in a different outfit, keeping us from achieving what we want. And that works in fiction or nonfiction. In nonfiction, it's easier to actually come out and say, this is your problem. Right. This is how you overcome it. That's therapy, that's counseling, which is what nonfiction does really well. But fiction, you do it as a metaphor.
Well, and that's interesting. You who can't overcome that often becomes the evil character in the novel. You know, like I'm thinking of the Marvel movies, you know, it's the person who at some point, you know, when they show the backstory, it's like Darth Vader even, you know, at one point he was not bad,
right,
but he turned to the dark side. And there were mitigating circumstances that turned him. So you can also take that, you know, here's the hero learning in the journey to overcome obstacles. And then there's this one that instead gives in and just joins the dark side and takes that easy side. So then you have the warring, Yeah,
and I would almost be willing to make the case that the trigger, the trip point in all characters, including us, is hope. If you do not have hope, if you finally wake up one morning and go, life is not going to get any better, this is it. I'm thinking of somebody incarcerated with life imprisonment. They're 23 years old. They're never going to get a chance at parole. You put that person in prison. If they can't find a way to wake up in the morning with a little bit of hope that somehow they can do something and accomplish something while in prison, that person is either going to kill themselves or they're going to do something violent.
Right.
Because they just have to act out on that anger. That's because they have nothing left. And so that's one of the reasons, if you're writing story, I would recommend write something where there's hope. You know, give your reader some hope and give your characters some hope, because otherwise you're creating a dark place that we don't know the consequences of where we put people in dark places. That's why, the plot thing, that moment.
No, I love that. Yeah.
Glimmer of hope is so important. Um,
Yeah.
and same thing with nonfiction. If you're writing nonfiction, you don't just lay out the facts and, do the data. Give your readers a pathway of hope forward. They may not be able to accomplish it all, but at least let them see. Kind of going to Egypt and the pyramid. Give Diana a route how to get to Egypt and the pyramid. At least give her the route. She may look at it and go, "Well, that's a long way to get there." You go, "Yeah, one day at a time. One step at a time. Get her there."
Yeah. No, that's good. I was just thinking about Paul when he, he always had a therefore. In Bible college, they taught us that was, he would, all the words he said prior to the word therefore were what they called laying the grounds for the appeal. Okay, I've told you this, and this about God. Therefore, you can trust him. Therefore, you'll know he'll never leave you nor forsake you. Therefore, your character can, so yes, all this has happened, but, therefore, what, is next for your character.
Yeah, I'm going to circle back one more for just a second to Darth Vader again, because I didn't hit on that talking about it. The final thing that we need to take into consideration when we're talking about our character, what do they want, is how does your lead character go about getting what they want? Okay, so this is where the moral fabric of your character comes in. There are a couple of ways you can do this, and you can either do it dishonestly or honestly. And reality is, if you do it the right way, a lot of times it's much harder. It just is. The beauty of the honest way is, in the end, if you get what you want, if you really do get it, it's probably yours to keep, right? You probably don't have to give it up. If you go about it dishonestly or unethically, eventually the backstory is going to catch up with you and pull you back down. So even then, it's just a temporary. But that's where, so when you're writing the story, this is where the moral themes will come in. It's how does your character go about getting the thing they want?
Yeah.
Diana, do you have any closing comments on how to get what you want for your character? Or
let me see here. Well, again, just I think the moral part that you just brought in, I think that's key. So like in Redeeming Love, the character, she wasn't choosing what we would deem as moral initially. She was making the wrong choices, and she lost everything in the end. But then when she got to that place, she had this other character that was constantly showing up for her. And so then she surrendered. So the character finally surrendered and then made the right choice. Just challenge yourself as a writer to look at your story afresh and ask yourself, is the struggle relatable to the human condition? And is it something, well, it doesn't have to be the identical struggle, but you definitely have to have your character struggling, and then making choices that end in a good, and don't be tempted. Okay, my final comment, I'll distill it down. Don't be tempted to wrap it all up in a tight, sweet bow. Be willing to just have your character have that aha moment and come to the realization or come to their senses like the prodigal did and say, I'm going to go home. I'm going to go home. And even leaving your character right there, it's a good story. That's a good way to end the story.
Yeah, I mean, because the prodigal, he got everything he wanted in Act 1. He got everything he wanted in Act 1, and at the end of Act 2, he didn't have anything. And he lost it. So it's a flip on the story, but it's the back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How about you? What's your final comment?
My final comment is to make sure that in the end there is redeeming hope somewhere in the story. That if I mean, we're tempted in this culture to put people and things in boxes. And I mean, we're tempted to put people and things and cultures just in boxes and say, well, now to your point, let's put a bow on this. This box is packaged, sealed up. We're not going to open it anymore. That there's a person in that box. We just put a person in a box and we just put them on a shelf and said, I'm going to forget about you. Right? We're tempted to do that today. And in writing, we don't have to do that. So this is where it gets a little bit messy. And this is where Jesus is messy. He was very messy with people, right? And so my advice is put enough hope in there that if you put somebody in a box, at least leave one of the flats up a little bit. So there's a little bit of hope they might be able to crawl out of the box later on that you put them in.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Well, this has been fun. Great. We'll be back next week. Enjoying the wonderful hot summer in North Carolina. Thank you, Diana. See you next week.
Okay. Thank you.